Did you know that our minds are attuned to hierarchical organizational structure? Our minds love hierarchical organizational structure. This is why it's no coincidence that we often tend to organize new information according to a hierarchical structure, whether it's biological taxonomy or a business's organizational chart, a so-called org chart, or even if you think about it, how we tend to organize textbooks or our notes or manuscripts. Textbooks tend to have a hierarchical structure to them if you think about it. They have headings followed by subheadings, followed by perhaps subheadings. Same thing with manuscripts that we write. We tend to organize them hierarchically. This is no coincidence. Our minds are very attuned to hierarchical structure. Perhaps for this reason, research suggests that when you have information presented to you in the form of an organizational hierarchical structure, you tend to remember it dramatically better than when it's presented to you in other formats. To capitalize on this principle of memory, try drawing out a hierarchical structure to organize the materials that you're currently trying to learn. Maybe even keep this drawing of a hierarchical structure in front of you to keep the overarching hierarchical perspective as you're going through the details of what it is that you're trying to learn right now or what it is that you're currently studying. Or if you're someone who likes to rewrite your notes in a neater form, try imposing a hierarchical organizational structure on them as you redo them, including drawing out a hierarchical diagram, but also including proper headings and subheadings and perhaps indentations in order to make clear what the hierarchical organization is to these notes that you're restructuring. If you're an instructor, it can help your students if you create a hierarchical organization to the material as you're teaching it or as you're presenting it to them, including actually presenting students with a hierarchical chart for them to use. In one of my classes, I create an organizational chart that I call long-term memory. Under the broader heading long-term memory, there are two subheadings in this chart: episodic memory and semantic memory. Under episodic memory, I have two headings under that, one called encoding and one called retrieval. And then under semantic memory, I have two headings, one called structure and one called access. Underneath each of these boxes, encoding and retrieval, the students are to list the specific research findings that are relevant to those particular areas within that overarching hierarchy. And under the two boxes, structure and access, the students list out the relevant research findings. So the purpose of having this structure is to help provide students with that hierarchical organizational framework to help them keep the broader perspective as they're going through the details of the research findings in this particular class. If you ever have occasion to play the game Kim's Game, this is a common game played by Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. It's named after the famous 1901 novel Kim. You might appreciate the benefits of hierarchical organization on memory. So if you're not familiar with Kim's Game, the game involves taking a tray and putting random objects onto the tray for a person to have to try to remember. The objects come from nearby. So if you're at a house, you just pick random trinkets and objects and bits of junk from around the house. It could be coins, rocks, dice, paper clips, pens. Could be just about any small object that you might encounter in a house. And you put these objects in a random assortment onto a tray. You put the tray in front of the person, and their task is to try to memorize the contents of that tray in a very short amount of time, say 1 minute. After that period of time, you take the tray away, and the person has to try to remember as many of the objects as they can. The person, among all of the participants, who remembers the most objects wins the game. It's very difficult to remember all of the objects in this game, but one of the demonstrations I carry out in my own science of learning class is to have students play this game. First, just without using any strategy, trying to remember as many objects on the tray as they can while they're in groups, and then with the strategy of trying to impose a hierarchical organizational structure onto the objects. So for this, I suggest imposing the structure small gift ideas with the overarching heading small gift ideas, and then beneath that 2 headings, gifts for adults, gifts for children. And beneath each of these, beneath the heading gifts for adults, I have jewelry as one subheading and office supplies as another. Under the subheading gifts for kids, I have toys as a subheading and candy as another subheading. And then what the student participants can do is organize the items on the tray in their mind according to this hierarchy and sort of place the items into their appropriate categories within this overarching hierarchical structure. What we tend to find is students will remember more of the items when they attach them to this hierarchical organizational structure than when they don't.